Hi, this video is about one of my books. It's about the Silver Witch, and this was the third book that I wrote about witches. It's a standalone novel, so you can read it before or after any of the others, it doesn't matter. And in this video I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what inspired me to write the book, how I wrote the book, and generally sort of answer the questions that I get asked at festivals and in interviews about my books. So stick around and you can find out little interesting snippets about not just the writing of this book, but about the research and maybe one or two pieces of book trivia too. And if you have any questions about the book, if you liked it or you're thinking of reading it, you can put them in the comments below. So let's get started. So one of the questions I'm often asked is, where do you get your ideas? And with this book it's a very simple one to answer because I live about 3 miles from a lake called Llangors Lake, which is one of the biggest lakes in Wales, very deep, very old, and of course with lots of bodies of water. There are legends attached to the lake. It's a part of the landscape from my childhood. I always used to ride horses on the mountain above it. I've seen it in different moods and different weathers, and it's just a beautiful place and really atmospheric. So it was quite easy to think, well, it would be great to write a story set on that lake. And so that was what inspired the idea for the setting. And then I thought, okay, well, I need to choose an era because I write historical fantasy. And this time I decided to divide the book into 2 time frames. So part of it is set in the present day, with a character called Tilda, who is a ceramicist, a potter if you like, who has recently bought a cottage and moved to the area after the loss of her husband. She's a year on from that terrible accident, so when she moves into the cottage she's on her own, starting her new life there. And the other character I wanted to be someone from an historical period. Now I do write lots of different historical eras. Some writers of historical fiction and historical fantasy always choose the same period, and I think that's probably a really good idea because then you just have to research one time, and a lot of people are very expert and are very knowledgeable about those times, and I think that's terrific. But I'm easily bored, so I thought, well, what if each time I wrote a book I set it in a different time, because that would make it more interesting. And it does for me, I hope it does for you, but it also means I have to research a new time every time I start a book. And this one was particularly challenging because I decided to set the historical part of the book in the 10th century, which is a wonderful, wonderful place to go to in my head and to visit, and it's very important for the lake here and for what happened on the lake. But of course there's not much recorded. The further back you go, the less material you have. I mean, Google Victorian London, you'll be there for a lifetime just reading what comes up. Go to the library and ask them for something on, 10th century Wales, and it's a skinnier sort of supply of information. So that's good and bad because it means you don't get overwhelmed by your research. It also means you get to make more things up. But it's a challenge, and it was a challenge I really enjoyed. So there's the present day section, and then the historical section is 10th century Wales, and the character in that part of the book is called Seren, and she's a seer or a prophet, and she's a very important part of her community. Okay, so that's how I got my inspiration. It was from the landscape and from the history of the landscape, because when I started looking into it, there was a crannog built on the lake, and that is a little man-made island, which is a huge achievement to build that at the end of the 9th, beginning of the 10th century. They built an island on the lake itself, and so my setting was very helpful for me. So that's where I got my idea for this book. Another question that I'm often asked about this book is to do with the point of view, because there are actually 2 viewpoints in this book. We have 2 main characters, and the sections in the book alternate between characters. So Tilda, that's the present day character, we look at her story through a very subjective third person. So although it's a third person voice, it's not actually through Tilda's voice, it is very close to her. We're privy to her thoughts, we know what she feels, we don't observe her from a distance, it's a subjective third person point of view, so we're very close to her. And I think that gave us a chance to watch her in her new environment, and that's what appealed to me of that one. For Seren, for the seer, in the earlier part of the book, she's first person, and that was important to me because I could hear her voice very strongly in my head when I was coming up with the story and brainstorming it and planning it, and I really wanted to speak in her voice when I wrote those bits, and my family will tell you that I tend to do this when I'm writing, and I'll be known to come out of my shed and continue to speak in the voice of my characters. I try not to do it when I go out of the house, at least. But anyway, I could hear Seren's voice very clearly, and I wanted to put it in the book very clearly, and I want people to have that experience of really seeing things through her eyes, as she was a seer. So I wrote that bit in the first person. The other thing about this book is it's all written in the present tense. Now, a lot of my books are written in the present tense, and I know it puts some people off. Some people don't like writing in it, some people don't like reading books that are written in the present tense. All I can tell you is that when I play around with the tenses for my books in the beginning, I get an idea of which one is going to fit that book, and that's the one I go with. It has happened that I've written an entire book, first draft, 100,000 words, and changed my mind about the tense and gone back and changed it, or changed my mind about the point of view and gone back and changed that, and it's not something I enjoy doing. I don't recommend it. So I do play around with different viewpoints and different tenses to begin with, but with this one it just came quite easily, so I felt that was a really good fit. Okay, so that's just a little bit about the Silver Witch and what inspired me, my choices about the format that I wrote it in, the little details of how I chose the technical aspects of writing the book, and we'll look again at the book. Maybe I'll do a reading from it later on, but that's just to give you a little bit of background, and if you'd like to know anything else, please ask in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll talk some more about my books another day. Happy reading!